Welcome to our first lesson for the grade 10 to 11 geography lesson series from NANCOL. Our topic for today is river processes. My name is Eno Ankonga from Ella Duplessis. I will be with you for this lesson. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the characteristic of a river valley, longitudinal profile, describe the processes by which the river erodes its channel, name and explain the process by which the river transports its load. Since our topic is about river processes, we are going to start by explaining what a river is. A river is a natural channel of flowing water originating from mountainous higher lying area toward lower lying areas such as sea or lake, as shown in the picture. As the river flows from the source toward the sea or lakes, it may erode its channel, both the banks and the beds, through the four erosional processes, namely attrition, abrasion, hydraulic action, and corrosion. Attrition is when rocks and stone which are carried by the river rub or knock against each other and break down into smaller pieces. Corrosion or abrasion is when sand and pebbles that are carried by the river erode the bank and the bed of the river by scoring them in abrasive effect, rubbing and scratching like effects. On the other hand, hydraulic action is when the sheer power of faster flowing water pushes against cracks in the banks of the river. This may widen and enlarge cracks, which eventually weaken until pieces of sediment start to fall off. And lastly, corrosion is when soluble rocks are eroded through chemical action and they dissolve in water. Another important aspect worth studying is how the river carries and transports its load as it moves toward its destination, since the load of the river varies in weight. Because even you as a person carrying loads and transports of different weight will carry them differently, so does the river. Therefore, the river transports its load through the four modes, which are traction, saltation, suspension, and solution. Traction is when the heavier boulders are rolled along the riverbed as they move downstream, while saltation is when light pebbles bounce along the riverbed as they move downstream, and suspension is when light materials such as clay are carried within the flow of water, and the solution is when dissolved rocks are transported as a solution with water. Take note for corrosion. It is corrosion, while for transport is solution. It must not be used to mean the same thing. Higher lying mountainous areas are known as the source, while where the river is flowing to is known as the mouth. The section of the river channel from the source to the mouth of the river is therefore known as longitudinal or long profile of the river, while the section from one bank or edge to the other bank is known as the cross section of the river. The longitudinal profile of the river has three stages, namely the upper course, middle course, and lower course. Viewers, we are now going to explain the characteristics of the channel of the river valley in the upper course using the following scripts. Because the upper course of the river has higher lying and mountainous area, the river has steeper valley and slope. Now, due to the steeper sides of the valley and the fact that the river is higher above sea level, the energy of the river is greater on the upper course. This results in the turbulent and violent flow of water. However, this higher energy level does not mean that the velocity is high on the upper course. The velocity is actually lower on the upper course compared to the other stages. This is because the river has greater friction and higher friction in this stage of the river because of the following reason. Firstly, the volume of water is lower in this stage, which gives a large surface area of contact between the water and the surface of the river. This reduces velocity. Secondly, the river has larger boulders and uneven bed, and this creates friction because the large boulder reduces the speed of flow as they cannot be lifted up. The river then uses most of the energy to roll these boulders on the floor or the bed of the river. This results in the spinning of these rocks, which create potholes on the bed of the river. Now imagine a 30-year-old man carrying a 50 kg bag of cement and racing with a 7-year-old carrying nothing. Who will be faster? Obviously the 7-year-old, although the 30-year-old man has more energy than the 7-year-old. The fact that the 30-year-old is carrying something very heavy means that his speed will be reduced. You can even take a 50 kg bag of cement and race 100 meters while recording the time, and then race for another 100 meters without a 50 kg bag of cement while recording the time again, and compare which time is faster. Also, something very important is that the large boulders are heavier. They sit on the very floor, speeding up vertical erosion, and as they are rolled along the very floor, they erode the riverbed through abrasion. This will result in a V-shaped valley. So it may be concluded that the river uses this greater energy it has in the upper course to overcome friction, which create a lower velocity. Furthermore, since the river flows violently in a turbulent way, it winds and swings along different sides of the river channel. This results in a faster erosion of the less resistant rocks and a slower erosion of the more resistant rock. This difference in erosion creates interlocking space. Viewers, we are now going to explain the characteristic of the river and its valley in the middle course stage of the river using the following information. As you move downstream, the feature of the river channel changes because you are moving toward a lower lying area. Therefore, the slopes and the gradient of the valley sides become gentler. Since many tributaries have joined the river will now have a higher volume of water as when compared to the upper course. Unlike in the upper course where vertical erosion was greater, in this stage of the river there is now more lateral or horizontal erosion. The reason for the lateral erosion is in the middle course may be because of wider valley. The stream is also deeper in the middle course of the river, and this is because there is more hydraulic action and abrasion of the riverbed. Larger pebbles from the upper course now become smaller and rounded as we move toward the middle course. This is because of attrition and abrasion. Now, since there is less friction, the velocity of the river becomes higher, especially near the center, near the deeper and the deepest part of the stream. However, the velocity may remain lower closer to the bank of the river because the friction is still higher closer to the banks, and it may also slower near the surface of the water due to friction with air. Both erosional and depositional processes are common in the upper middle course of the river. Viewers, we are now going to explain the characteristic of the river and its valley in the lower course stage of the river using the following information. As we move further downstream toward the lower course, we begin to notice other significant change in the river channel and its valley. This is because toward very lower lying area, this causes the river to have a very gentle slopes and sides. Now, since the river has gentle slope, during high discharge and heavy rainfall, the river may overflow its bank and flood all over lower lying area adjacent to its bank, resulting in the formation of floodplains on the other sides of the river where silts and alluvium will be deposited. Also, at this stage of the river, all the tributaries and smaller channels have entered the river, and therefore the discharge of volume will be highest here. Due to very less friction in this stage, velocity is also higher in the lower course. The other important feature of the river valley at the lower course are that the channel is wider and deeper. You have learned about erosional and depositional processes and the stages of the river where they occur most or least. Now let's do the following exercise. State in which stage of the river do we find the following landforms and indicate whether they are erosional or depositional landform. The landforms are waterfall, oxbow lakes, floodplains, rapids, gorge, deltas, pothole, levees, meanders. Waterfall, gorge, potholes are found in the upper course and they are both erosional landforms. While oxbow lake, floodplain, delta, levees, and meander can be both found in the middle and the lower course of the river, and they are all depositional landform except the meander, which is both erosional and depositional. Let's recap on what we discussed. We looked at the characteristic of the river in each stages, whereby we said the upper course of the river has steeper sides, a shallower valley, lower velocity, a smaller volume of water, narrower and a V-shaped valley. While in the middle course we learned that the river has a U-shaped valley, higher volume of water, higher velocity, deeper valley, more lateral erosion. And the lower course of the river is the widest, the deepest, with the fastest velocity and has the highest volume of water. We also discussed the types of erosion and the transportation processes known. Erosion processes are attrition, corrosion, abrasion, and hydraulic action, while the method of river transportation that we discussed are traction, saltation, suspension, and solution. We must be able to describe these processes well that we have discussed earlier and not just list them. Thank you very much for your time, and again, until next time.